immediately crossing number 7 out. "That one is just no fun at all," he explained. I giggled. Only Tristan could make me giggle. He sent me a warm smile. "I named my vibrator after you," I told him with a smirk. "He's small, but he makes up for it by working hard." He straightened, moving a little close to show me just how small he wasn't. I backed up to the edge of the table, and he followed. He gave me his sinful smile. "I'm big like this everywhere. Don't make me prove it to you." I rolled my eyes. Every guy says that. It would be refreshing to meet a guy that just admitted to being average-sized, or, God forbid, small. He shook his head. "You want me to do something crazy. I see your game now. Not falling for it." I couldn't hold back a smile because I had been egging him on. The man was so outrageous, he'd do anything on a dare. I shrugged. "I'll never know, but in my imagination, it's very clearly average, bordering on small. No way to change it." He pursed his lips, his finger going to the button on his jeans. I slapped my hand over my eyes, running away and giggling like a kid. He overtook me in seconds, picking me up easily. He flung me over his shoulder, heading to the back door. I knew where this was leading. "Put me down!" I screeched between giggles. "I just washed my hair." "Every time you make me want to pull my dick out for you, for any reason, I'm throwing you in the pool. This is for the sake of our friendship, Danika." I was already flying through the air before he'd finished talking. I heard him say Danika right before my head went under. The bastard. Chapter 14. As though putting it in writing had somehow aggravated the situation, the sexual tension between us only seemed to get worse. Still, no one could say that we didn't try our best to stick to that stupid list. I found myself at his mother's house for dinner the next day, which I found strange and a little surreal, but he was persistent enough to talk me into just about anything. She lived about 45 minutes away, in one of the more run-down neighborhoods just east of the Strip. Her house was big, but in rough shape at a glance, with huge chunks missing from the stucco, a disaster of a lawn, and 2 cars parked in the driveway that were missing tires. I shot Tristan a glance. "She has 2 full-grown sons. Why don't you guys help her fix up the place?" He'd been about to get out of the car, but he paused at that, his brow furrowed. "It's complicated. I've tried before, but her boyfriend takes it as an insult if someone else tries to make repairs to her house, even though he'll never do it himself." "He sounds like a winner," I muttered, not quite under my breath. As always, I was gratified to hear him laugh. My lips turned up in a happy smile. Not everyone could appreciate my brand of sarcasm, and I relished the fact that Tristan seemed to find it endlessly entertaining. "He's difficult, but I try not to make any waves. I learned a long time ago not to get between my mom and one of her boyfriends." I thought that was telling, and I sent him a sympathetic look as we made our way to the house. "I can relate to that," I told him quietly. "My mom once tried to kick me out of the house because I told one of her boyfriends that he wasn't my dad." I swallowed, finding it hard to tell him the story for some strange reason. It wasn't as though it was a sensitive subject for me. "I was 8 at the time." He stopped and grabbed my hand, a world of understanding in his eyes. "I see more and more why we took to each other so quickly. We've been through a lot of the same things. It's nice to have someone that just understands." I squeezed his hand, losing myself a little in his golden eyes. "It is nice." It felt like we shared a moment of perfect understanding, but it was short-lived. As the front door opened, Jared poking his smiling face out. "Hey!" he called out. "The food is ready. Good timing. Get in here." He popped his head back inside, rather reminding me of Ivan for a moment. I liked Jared, but I didn't quite get him. He could be like a carefree kid at times, and almost too intense at others. I felt like I was missing some piece of the puzzle where he was concerned. He was so much easier than Tristan in ways, but he worried me more. though I couldn't have said just why. One thing was certain. Neither men were a puzzle that I expected to solve any time soon. Tristan let go of my hand, which left me feeling a little bereft. I could admit to myself that I loved it when he held my hand. It made me feel so connected to him, for such a small contact. He didn't leave me like that for long, his hand moving to the small of my back in a light caress that nudged me forward with him. "You're going to love my mother, but more than that, you are going to die for her enchiladas." The house we walked into was crowded but colorful, the walls painted brightly, but a little too cramped with furniture and knickknacks. His mother was a surprise to me for several reasons. She was young, or at least she looked very young. She could have maybe passed for Jared and Tristan's older sister, rather than their mother. The biggest surprise by far, though, was that she was very obviously Hispanic, with a thick accent. I'd always just thought of the brothers as big white boys. "Mama, this is my friend Danika. Danika, this is my mother, Leticia." He accented the name in a way I'd never heard him speak before, immediately showing me a touch of his Latin side. I blinked, thrown for a bit of a loop. Leticia was beautiful. There was a very obvious resemblance between the three of them. Their features all had a similar, striking cast, though her eyes were black and her skin was a few shades darker. Her thick black hair fell in heavy waves to her mid-back. She gave me a smile, and it was lovely, but I noticed that Tristan must have gotten those dimples of his somewhere else. She hugged me like family, kissing me on both cheeks. "So lovely to meet you, Danika. You may call me Mama if you like. I never get to meet any of the girls Tristan spends time with. You must be special." I caught Tristan shaking his head out of the corner of his eye. "I wonder why I never bring any girls here. Really, Mama? Don't embarrass her." "If she chooses to spend a lot of time with you, I doubt she's easily embarrassed." Leticia shot back. I thought she had a good point. "Dinner's getting cold," Jared pointed out from the doorway that led into a divine-smelling living room. The table was small, but loaded with food. "I'll do cleanup, Mama," Tristan said, pulling out 2 chairs from the table and nodding his mother and I into each, "since I missed helping out on all the prep." "Gracias, mijo," she said, shooting him a very fond smile. "Brown noser," Jared muttered, from his seat directly opposite of me. I shot him a wry smile for that one. It's like he'd read my mind. Tristan sat to my right, and for some crazy reason, I felt his big hand squeeze my knee after he sat down. I shot him a rather shocked glare, and he removed it just as quickly as he placed it there, his expression completely innocent. If he wanted to play the teasing game, I thought I had a distinct advantage. I wasn't the one that needed to jack off in the shower 5 times a day. I shook myself out of that distracting thought process as everyone began to dish out the food. Leticia had a heaping serving on my plate before I could tell her it was too much. The cheese enchiladas already had my mouth watering when Tristan spooned some black beans and rice onto my plate, and Leticia followed it with scoops of fresh pico de gallo, guacamole, and sour cream. Mother and son were tag team overfeeding me, and I kind of loved it. Leticia blessed the food, and I dug in eagerly. The first bite of the enchiladas had me closing my eyes, and I didn't even try to stifle my moan of pleasure. Enchiladas were my favorite, and these ones were a perfect combination of everything. I thought it was the sauce that made it so perfect. Tristan's big hand squeezing my knee again was what it finally took to get me to open my eyes. He was staring at me, and the look in his eyes was downright sinful. I swallowed, my jaw going a little slack with want as the hand on my knee caressed me, moving just a touch higher. I was wearing shorts, so it was skin on skin, and more than a little distracting. I quickly snapped out of his little spell, glancing at Leticia and Jared. I was vastly relieved to see that they weren't paying attention to us, instead digging into their own food with gusto. I took another bite, shooting him a glance. He was still rubbing my knee, and for some asinine reason, I wasn't pushing his hand away. Even more asinine, my left hand moved to cover his under the table, rubbing over his knuckles softly then harder. I thought about touching him way more than I actually touched him, and so when I did, it always seemed to escalate way too fast. His hand was moving higher, and my own traitorous hand was only encouraging it, kneading his fingers harder into my thigh. "So good, right?" Jared asked loudly, and I pushed Tristan's hand away, my face turning bright pink. "So good," I agreed, meaning it, as I took another bite. "The best," Jared added. "Hands down," Tristan agreed. I nodded, though I secretly thought that Tristan's had been just as good. Leticia flushed with pleasure. "I have the sweetest sons in the world, don't I, Danika?" I bit my tongue to keep from making a sarcastic comment, playing nice instead. "They're both very sweet. A mother couldn't ask for more." I was oddly touched when I caught the soft smile Tristan gave her for that comment. Dessert consisted of stiff margaritas, which I thought said a lot. This family could drink, tiny mother included. I was stuffed and just a touch tipsy when the meal ended. I found myself lounging on a comfortable sofa in the TV room that directly connected to the kitchen, as Tristan and his mother cleaned up after dinner. I had a clear view of mother and son working in the kitchen together. Jared joined me on the couch, sitting close, making a point to follow my gaze to his brother. "He's a good guy," he said quietly. "A good brother. He's had my back since I can remember, even if I was in the wrong." "He's always looked out for you," I guessed. "He can't seem to help himself." "That's what big brothers are for," I explained. Jared studied me. "You say that like you can relate. Are you a big sister?" A familiar pain pinched at my chest. That pain never seemed to lessen. Time hadn't done a thing to numb it, which was why I supposed I did my best never to think about my little sister. I swallowed hard, his prying not making me want to lash out, as it would have with Tristan. I felt no compunctions about lashing out at Tristan, but somehow I did with Jared. It felt like Jared and I were on equal footing, but somehow, even at his sweetest and most amiable, I always felt that Tristan had the upper hand, and in a way, that made it hard for me to open up to him. I kept my eyes on Tristan where he was helping his mother in the other room, and my voice very impersonal. "I am. I have a younger sister, but I'm not like Tristan. I tried my best, but I was a shitty big sister." I didn't look at him, but Jared sounded very sympathetic as he asked, "What happened?" I shook my head, surprised that I actually answered the question. "Too much to go back from. She loathes me, and I don't blame her. We haven't spoken in years." "Where does she live?" I couldn't say. She asked me never to contact her again, and I've respected that request. I didn't have words to express how hard that had been for me, to be utterly rejected by the only person in the world I'd considered real family. I'd loved her so much, but it hadn't been enough to keep me from failing her. How long ago was that? 4 years ago? Damn, how old are you? 21. Me too, he said. I'd known his age, courtesy of Tristan, but Jared sounded surprised about mine. "So all of this went down when you were 17? How old was she?" I swallowed, surprised that, of all his probing questions, that one was the sorest wound. "Just 15. Just a baby." "Don't you think enough time has passed for things to blow over? I'll bet she's not even mad anymore. You should try to find her." I shook my head, not even considering the notion. Dahlia's rejection hadn't been about anger. It had been about betrayal, disgust, and contempt, and I didn't blame her for any of it. "It's not as simple as that." My voice was quiet, my tone final. His hands clasping my own startled me enough to make me start violently, but I didn't push it away. I didn't look at him, because there was nothing on earth I wanted less than sympathy, and seeing it directed at me always inspired unpredictable results. But still, I let his hand comfort me for just a moment. "I think you're too hard on yourself, Danika." I'd heard that line before, exhaustively, from Lucy and Bev, and even a few times Jerry. Everyone was always telling me that I was too hard on myself. Apparently, even people that I barely knew these days thought so. If they were all right about that, I still didn't know what to do about it. I'd made some healthy changes for myself over the years, which had been largely instigated by the persistent Lucy, but I couldn't begin to know how to change something so fundamental to my nature. The fact was, I expected a lot from myself, and I was often disappointed. Tristan turned, getting a good look at his brother and I, sitting close and clutching hands. Of course he'd look just then, I thought wryly. I saw his jaw tighten and knew he wasn't happy with what he saw. Still, I was surprised when he strode right to us, his eyes boring straight into Jared. "A word?" he said through his teeth, then turned on his heel, striding out the back door. Jared sighed heavily. "Well, fuck," he muttered. He squeezed my hand lightly before standing and following his brother. I could imagine what was going on back there. Tristan would be reaming his brother out for what he'd have taken as a direct come-on, and certainly his brother was capable of that. They both were. But I didn't think that had been what Jared was about. He was a genuinely nice guy, and I really thought he had just been offering comfort after asking a few too many awkward questions. I told Jared that I would consider going out with him when I was ready to date again, but I had to wonder if that was even an option. I knew, just knew, that if I dated Jared, it would drive Tristan insane, no matter that he and I had firmly committed to just being friends. What a mess, I thought. Leticia came to sit beside me. Her eyes were on the back door, her brow furrowed. I marveled again at how lovely she was as she turned her dark eyes on me. "You aren't going to make my boys fight over you, are you?" she asked softly, glancing at the back door. It was sliding glass, but the brothers had moved out of sight right after they'd closed the door. Her words struck me as a little hostile, but she didn't seem hostile, just concerned. "I'm not." My words were soft, and even to my own ears they lacked any conviction. That made me defensive. "Tristan and I are strictly friends." She shot me a sardonic look. She'd been sweet as sugar to me so far, but I saw the spicier side to her personality in that one look. "You're a smart girl, but that's not a smart assessment. Strictly friends, do you really believe that?" My mouth twisted. "We're trying really hard to keep it that way. It's what's best for both of us." She tossed her hair and rolled her eyes. It made me smile. Who was I to knock a sassy woman? "Well, good luck to you, but I think you're fighting a losing battle. And God help you if Tristan decides he wants more. He's just like his father, and his father was impossible to resist, even when he was being a bastard. God, I loved that bastard. I named Tristan after him in the hopes that he would be like that. His father could be callous, but so charismatic. That man could get anything he wanted out of life. I wanted my son to be like that." "You named him after his father that left you both?" She did her little hair toss/eye roll. "I did, and I don't regret it. Tristan hates that I did that, but it makes perfect sense to me." It did not make sense to me, and I was definitely siding with Tristan on that one, but I held my tongue. I didn't need to get into an argument with a woman I'd just met about something that was none of my business. "And what about Jared? Did you name him after his father?" "I did. I loved him too." "And did he leave too?" I knew I'd overstepped with that one, but it didn't seem to faze her. "He stuck around for years, actually. He was a very nice man. If you want to know the difference between the fathers, just look at the brothers." That made me a little angry. I didn't think it was fair to compare Tristan to a man who had left his son with no father. But then again, I had very similar baggage, so I was a touch sensitive about it. "Has Tristan knocked up any girls and then run in the other direction?" I asked, feeling riled. She pursed her lips, sending me a sidelong look. He hasn't. Not yet, anyway. You don't need to defend him to me. No one loves him more than I do. Then give him a little credit. She waved her hands in the air, as though erasing the conversation. Enough of this serious talk. I love my boys. That's all I meant. Don't make them hate each other. I would never. Good. Then let's move on. Do you like Mota? I just blinked at her, confused. Mota? Hair toss, eye roll. Marijuana. Do you like? I shook my head vigorously. In my experience, only losers smoked pot, and so I'd always stayed far, far away from the stuff. Well, I like, so I hope you don't mind if I partake. I shook my head again. It's your house. The brothers were both smiling as they filed back into the house, which I found reassuring, but I was a little shocked when Leticia casually handed Jared a lit joint, and he just took it, thanking her. Was this normal? Was I really such a prude? She offered one to Tristan, but he waved her off, glancing at me. Don't deny yourself on my account, I said wryly, though I really didn't want him to. I hated this stuff. He shook his head. No, I'm good. What the hell was up with that move you made during dinner? I asked him later as he drove us home in my junker of a car. His tone and even his lying face were all innocence. You know what? The hand on my knee. What was that all about? He sighed, dropping the act. Fuck, I'm sorry about that. Just watching you eat with that look on your face. I lost my mind for a minute. You were being a tease. I'd recommend you not start playing that game with me. Is that a threat? He asked, sounding all sorts of intrigued with the idea. It is. Don't start a war you can't win, my friend. In the battle of teases, I would whip your slutty ass, you sex fiend. He laughed so hard that he had to pull the car over. You know I'm right, I said, folding my arms over my chest. He nodded. I completely agree. But you know I can't turn down a challenge. Is that what you're doing? Making it a challenge? I shook my head. No, there's no challenge. No competition at all, and I refuse to turn it into a bet. He pulled the car back onto the street again, smiling and shaking his head. That's a pity. Dare I ask? Why is that a pity? Because I'd love to win or lose a bet like that. But you're right. It would be a stupid thing to do. So stupid. I agreed. We didn't say another word on the ride home, and I just knew that we were both thinking about how much we wanted to do something stupid. Chapter 15. We went a few days without managing to do anything stupid, but of course that wasn't meant to last. The only surprising thing was, I was the first one to break open the stupid dam. I woke up a few mornings later, having the most graphic sex dream of my life. It was Tristan's big hands on me in the dream, cupping my breasts and kneading, working down my belly, between my legs. We were out in the pool, alone. Like most dreams, nothing quite made sense. Like, why were we skinny dipping in the middle of the day? Still, my dreaming mind went with that eagerly. I was lying on an inflatable lounge that we hardly ever used, because it was shaped in a huge circle, with the middle cut out, and the boys always found horrible ways to use it, like sticking each other's heads in the hole and dunking. The hole was being used for an entirely different wrong way in my dream, though. Tristan filled the hole, his distracting torso spilling out of it as he used his mouth on me in the most distracting way. I'd never had a guy go down on me before, and even in the dream my imagination was limited. He just nuzzled me there, his hands far more of a distraction. I woke up with my panties around my knees and my shirt pulled up to my neck. One of my hands was on a sensitive breast, kneading at it, the other fingering my clit with restless strokes. It wasn't that I didn't care that Tristan was sleeping on the other side of my queen-sized bed. A big pillow was all that separated us. It was more that I was too turned on to let it deter me, and my sleepy mind told me that I could be quiet enough not to wake him. I'd gotten myself too worked up to stop, but I knew from experience that I needed more than my fingers to get myself off. The hand on my breast reached over to my nightstand, opening the drawer very slowly, the finger on my clit still circling, again and again. I tried not to make any noise as I fished out my vibrator, but the low vibrating sound that it made when I turned it on was louder than I could ever remember. Then again, I didn't have the luxury of turning on music to drown it out, as I usually did, with someone dead asleep in the bed next to me. I gasped as I shoved it inside me. I was wet from the dream, and it slid right in. I used one hand to hold it there, the hand from my breast moving to work on my clit. My eyes were closed, my breath coming out in quiet little pants. They only opened as I felt the bed moving. That movement should have made me stop, or panic, or do anything at all besides moan, shift the wand inside of me, and bite my lip as I glanced over at the gorgeous man moving towards me. Stupid, 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 I told myself. More, 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 my body screamed back. Tristan made a guttural sound, low in his throat, and I couldn't hold back my own low moan. I was under the covers, but so was he, so that hardly helped. I didn't protest when he pulled them off both of us. He moved close, crouched at my side, his knees a breath away from my hip and thigh. The look in his eyes was intoxicating. He bit his lip, and I felt myself clench around the wand in response. My legs were splayed apart, and he moved to straddle one of my thighs, looming over me, but still not touching. I watched him swallow hard, his eyes fixed on my hands. I squirmed. "Can I help?" he asked hoarsely. I couldn't even form the words to answer, just whimpering and shifting restlessly instead. He took that for a yes. One of his hands covered the hand that held the wand, tugging it up my body. I started to protest as it started to slip out of me, but his knee caught it, pushing it deep inside of me. "Oh," I gasped. He moved my hand until I was cupping my own breast. He squeezed my wrist, which in turn made me knead harder at my pliant flesh. "Pinch your nipple," he told me, licking my bottom lip. I felt my own tongue copy the motion as I obeyed. My eyes, hungry to take him in, shot from his intent face down his ripped torso, past the sexy V formed by the muscles at his hips, and to his heavy erection. He still wore boxer briefs, but they barely contained his jutting cock. I gyrated my hips, trying to get closer to his knee, and grinded the vibrator deeper inside of me. He moaned. "That's right, Danika. Perfect. Circle your hips just like that." His other hand moved over the hand I had on my clit, not touching anything but the back of my hand as he took over the movements. I circled my hips, while he moved my hand to circle my clit with just the perfect pressure. He moved the hand at my nipple to my other breast, nearly touching my skin as he rubbed my fingers deep. He cursed long and fluidly. I caught the movement at the bottom of my vision and looked down to see his erection visibly twitch, pre-cum soaking his boxers where they touched the tip of him. "Tristan," I moaned. I closed my eyes, a heady orgasm washing over me in lush waves. "Danika," he rasped, his knee jerking up until it was no more than a whisper away from my entrance. He moaned, long and low. I didn't open my eyes again until I felt him moving away. The wand slipped partially out of me, and I pulled it the rest of the way out, hastily turning it off as I rolled over to look at him. He'd flung himself onto his back beside me, his arm thrown over his eyes. His breathing was harsh. I swallowed, my eyes moving down his body. "Did you, He sucked in a breath. His voice was low. "Please, don't ask. I haven't embarrassed myself that bad since I was a teenager." I glanced down, the state of his shorts and his words telling me clearly what the answer was. I lay down on my back, pulling the covers up to my neck. I was a little in shock about what I'd just done. What the hell was wrong with me? My hormones had ignited, and I was pretty sure I'd lost some important brain cells in that fire. Fuck, what was that? He panted. That was crazy, I gasped. And stupid. Especially stupid. If that was your first attempt at winning the teasing war, I'm not sure if you just won or lost it all with one try. In spite of myself, I giggled. There is no teasing war. Get that out of your head. This is not a contest. This is a disaster that never needs to happen again. Seriously, though, if I wake up to that again, I'm not sure what I'll do, Danika. It won't happen again, so don't worry your pretty little head about it. And what if I accidentally start jerking myself off in my sleep? Stop it, you're incorrigible. And you are the queen of all teases. You know I'll never get that picture out of my head. Fuck. Do you have any idea how much this messes with me? I sighed. I think I have a pretty good idea, Tristan. Can we just never mention this again? I can try, but that doesn't mean I won't be thinking about it. Yeah, I know. There was no way I'd ever forget the look on his face as he'd helped me get myself off. Just let me ask you one thing, before I drop the subject forever. I blew my breath out in a noisy sigh. Go for it. What started that? I was having a sex dream. I think I can feel some sympathy for the wet dream thing guys have now. Was it about anyone specific? He sounded more than idly curious. No, I lied through my teeth. And that was more than one question. One more, I swear, and then I'm done. What was the dream about? I was getting oral on a floaty in the pool. He cursed fluently, and he didn't ask me any more questions. Chapter 16. The next stupid incident started with an unexpected package, a chicken-murdering hound, and the dog chase from hell. Ivan was at the table, working on his daily journal entry, and Matt was busy scribbling in one of his coloring books. It was raining out, a summertime Vegas flash flood, but it was still hot as hell. I wore a thin white tank top and my favorite sassy pants shorts. I was just correcting Ivan's spelling when the doorbell rang. I shot an annoyed look at Jerry's closed office door. He and Tristan had been in there for hours, discussing supposed band things, but it was the closest room to the front door, and I was right in the middle of lessons, so it seemed to me that one of them should answer it. As though they'd read my mind, the office door opened, and both men stepped out, serious looks on their faces, as though they really had been discussing important business. Tristan opened the front door, greeting the UPS guy. UPS guy needed a signature, so Tristan stepped back, opening the door wider. Jerry moved in to sign. My last thought, right before all hell broke loose, was how strange it was that no dogs had crowded at the front entrance as soon as they'd heard the doorbell. One lone bastard of a dog shot straight from the hallway and out the front as though he'd been planning for just this moment. "Coffee cup!" I shouted, pointing like a crazy woman. Everyone just turned and stared at me, instead of at the dog I'd been yelling about. Perfect. I grabbed a leash off its hook in the hallway by the kitchen, shoving my feet into a pair of Bev's running shoes. I was following that crazy dog out the door in less than 30 seconds. Please let the chickens be locked up tight. Please let the chickens be locked up tight, was a mantra in my head as I booked it across the neighborhood. I was a fast runner. I went to great pains to stay in good shape and jogged outside whenever the weather allowed, which was why I was surprised when Tristan was suddenly running beside me and then passing me. I wasn't sure when he'd left the house, but I was sure it had been after I had. I saw a flash of spotted brown fur at the corner of my vision and turned on my heel. We were still several house rows away from the stables, which meant we actually had a shot at saving some chickens. Coffee Cup hesitated at one house, sniffing out something, and I pounced, diving for him. The rain had already made his coat slick and wet, and he wriggled out of my arms before I could get the leash on his collar. I screamed curses at him as I scrambled back to my feet, resuming the chase. I nearly cheered as Tristan intercepted him in the muddy ditch that led up and directly into the stables. He gripped the dog's collar, hooting with laughter. We were sharing rather smug smiles as I approached, when Coffee Cup pulled a ninja dog move and slipped out of his collar, darting for the stables. Tristan tackled him, grabbing him around the chest to hold him back. I dug into the mud for his collar, glaring at the stupid dog while I tightened it around his neck, one rung tighter than the last time, since it had apparently been loose enough for him to slip out of. I clipped the leash on, still catching my breath.
You look like you couldn't decide whether you wanted to mud wrestle or be in a wet t-shirt contest,
Tristan said with a laugh, having to shout to be heard over the downpour. I looked down at my sopping wet, muddy white tank top. He had a point, but he hadn't fared any better. I pointed at him. So do you. You look worse, in fact. I'm not the one on their back in the mud. I shouldn't have said it. It was too much like a challenge, and I should have known better than to offer Tristan a challenge. His hands snaked behind my knees, pulling me down with him, until my bare knees sank heavily into the mud on either side of his hips. You son of a bitch, I said, but I was laughing. I'm pretty sure saying that is a faux pas, now that you've actually met my mother. My bad, I take it back. Here, accept my sincere apology. As I spoke, I reached down, gripping a heavy handful of mud. I was giving him my sweetest smile as I smeared it on top of his head. He gasped, and then gave me the most evil grin. You're gonna pay for that, he said through his teeth. I tried to get up, but one hand on my hip kept me straddling him. He had the advantage, with much bigger hands, and the huge gob of mud that he smeared over my chest far outweighed the bit I'd put on his head. I gasped in outrage. That was so much worse than what I did to you. So rude. He laughed, muddy hand going to my other hip. Really? A handful of mud on your chest is worse than what you just did to my head? Well, let's see, I said, diving for more mud. My target was no secret. I went for his face. He caught both of my wrists, pulling them far apart, which brought our chests flush. I rubbed against him, smearing as much mud as I could from my thin white shirt onto his. The motion of our chests rubbing together had our playful mood changing in a hurry. He brought my wrists behind my back, pushing me down until my hips were crushed to his, as though they had a mind of their own. My hips moved, bearing down. My entire body seemed to shudder as I made contact with his obvious erection. Our faces were close, and I couldn't have said whether it was him or me that moved first, but our lips met in a furious clash. He lay back, and I followed him down, moaning into his mouth as his tongue swept into mine, invading like he owned the place. His kiss was insidious, seeping into every part of me. He took me over in a way I couldn't believe I allowed. A few seconds into the kiss, and I was ready to relinquish all control, which I'd have sworn was the antithesis of everything I was before I'd met Tristan. He let go of my hands, his fingers sinking into my ass as he pushed his straining cock right into the center of me. I'd never considered myself to be a particularly sexual person, but I was mindless in that moment, every part of me sexual, focused only on the heavy beat of desire in my blood, of having him inside of me. I gripped one hand into his short hair, the other reaching down his chest, over his hard abdomen, and finally over his thick length, rubbing. He panted against me, and I bit my bottom lip. He growled, delving back into my mouth. God only knows how far we would have let things go but for a shrill scream that echoed to us from the stables. I yanked back, looking around, totally confused for a moment as to where I even was. Finally, the sight of my hand, my empty hand, where the leash should have been, jarred me back into the problem at hand.
coffee cup!"
I yelled, stumbling to my feet. Tristan used his hands on my hips to help leverage me up, and I was off, sprinting towards the stables, hoping that I wasn't too late to save at least some of those damned prize chickens. It was a massacre. Feathers and blood made a trail that led me right to the chicken-murdering dog, who would still have been happily murdering away if one parka-covered crazy lady didn't already have his leash in hand. She was literally shaking with rage as I took the leash away from her. She pointed at me accusingly, as though I had been the one to behead. I counted 1, 2, 3 of her chickens. Damn, but he was efficient at murdering chickens. This had to be a record. "I'm so sorry," I began.
"The Homeowners Association will hear about this," she cut in.
I nodded, my eyes wide, not sure how to handle her. We only ever saw each other when stuff like this happened, so I'd only ever seen her crazy side. As far as I knew, she was straight crazy chicken lady all the time.
"That dog is a menace," she shouted.
I nodded again. I couldn't argue with that. I didn't point out that if she didn't let her chickens run loose around the stables all the time, they wouldn't make such easy targets for bloodthirsty coffee cup. I knew from experience that trying to form any kind of defense only made her crazier. Tristan approached right as she was storming off, still muttering curses at an ironically contrite-looking coffee cup.
"Well,"
he said, running a hand over his muddy head,
"that could have gone better."
"You broke your promise, you know," I told him as soon as Crazy Chicken Lady was out of earshot. He raised a brow in question, trying ineffectually to dry himself off with his hands. "You promised that if Coffee Cup got out while you were around, you'd catch him before he murdered any chickens."
I did catch him. If you'll recall, I caught him back in that muddy ditch over there. You're the one that let him go again."
He had a point there.
"We broke half of the rules on our list back in that ditch,"
he told me as we made our way back to the house. "I'm well aware."
"I think I know what the problem is."
He sounded resigned and troubled. I didn't particularly want to hear what had him sounding so serious. "We're stupid and a little nuts?" I guessed.
"I've been celibate for too long,
and now I'm taking it out on you.
I need to blow off some steam, you know?"
That stung. It shouldn't have, but it hurt bad. I was on board with the friend thing, but the idea that this attraction between us had more to do with his own sexual frustration and nothing to do with how he might feel about me, well, it made me want to cry, which made me feel like a particularly stupid girl, and I hated that feeling. I liked to think that my head ruled me, not my heart, and being around Tristan played havoc with that idea.
"I think I'll go out tonight. By myself."
Ouch, 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 I thought. "That makes sense," I said. "I need to catch up on sleep anyway. This crazy clubbing schedule is not my thing." "I'll make you breakfast in the morning," he offered. I grimaced, wondering if he would even be home in the morning. "Don't worry about it. I'll manage." He snagged my hand, stopping our progress to look at me. I squinted at him, rain falling straight into our faces. This was no place to have a chat. "Are you upset?" I shook my head. "Of course not," I said instantly, my tone dismissive. I was upset, but I didn't have a right to it, so I refused to acknowledge it out loud. I had too much pride for that. "How the hell are we going to go into the house like this?" I asked, changing the subject. "We're covered in mud. Maybe we should just stay in the rain until it washes off."
"The backyard hose?"
he suggested. That turned out to be a bad idea, even if it was our only option. Someone who you badly want to sleep with, but have decided that you won't, is not the person you want to hose down with water in a hot, hot rainstorm. I was in a black mood after that, but tried hard not to show it. As I went through my daily chores, played with the boys, and put them to bed, I just felt down and sad. And as I realized how depressed I was feeling, that's when it occurred to me just how happy I'd been since Tristan had come along, hangovers and all. I'd been giddy lately, the days flying by, as though in a dream, and it suddenly felt as though it was all crashing down on me. What were we doing? Hanging out constantly and playing house? What did it mean? Nothing. Nothing at all. Well, except for one thing. I was a stupid girl, and I had feelings for a guy who was basically a walking hormone where women were concerned. Tristan seemed to sense my mood, and he turned extra affectionate. Nothing blatant, no come-ons, just a shoulder rub, a random kiss on the forehead, or a careless hand stroked over my hair, with lots of questions like, "Is everything okay? Are we cool?" I gave answers like, "I'm just tired," and "I need to catch up on sleep." I never slipped up once, never told him that I hated that he was going out without me, and especially that I hated why he was doing it. I kept my pride, if nothing else. Tristan was beyond sweet, helping me put the boys to bed, and even playfully insisting on tucking me in before he went out. He wasn't going any place with a dress code, I noted, by his black t-shirt and jeans. Still, he looked too gorgeous to be real, and I hated how easy I knew it would be for him to find some random girl to fuck. "Don't wait up for me," he told me with a wink. I made sure he saw me roll my eyes. "I'll be asleep before Kenny even picks you up." I didn't cry after he'd gone, but it was just as troubling to me that I had to make an effort not to. Eventually, I fell into a fitful sleep. The sound of the bathroom door closing, and then the shower turning on, woke me. My tired eyes found the clock. It was 4 a.m. Tristan was just getting home, and I was suddenly wide awake. I waited in silence when he finally finished his shower, walking quietly to his side of the bed. "Did you get lucky?" I whispered as he settled in. He froze, and then he was hugging me from behind, his voice a rasp in my ear. "You waiting up for me, boo?" "No, I just woke up when you opened the door." "So, did you? Get lucky?" I held my breath as I waited for his answer. He sighed. "I did. Hopefully I can control myself now. Our friendship is safe." He patted my hip comfortingly as he said it, like he'd done it for me. He'd washed the other woman off him, or at least I didn't smell anything like that on him, but I still smelled the alcohol on his breath. And there was something about his voice, not a slur, but something more subtle, some sense of disconnect in his tone that made me think he was high, or at least very drunk. I shut my eyes tightly, cursing the tears that bled down my cheeks. It took me forever to get to sleep. I just lay there for a long time, calling myself every kind of fool. Chapter 17. I woke up in a black mood. I put on a good show for the boys, but all I wanted to do was curl up in a ball and be alone for days. The fact that Tristan stayed in bed for most of the morning didn't help. I was feeling self-destructive, was the best way to put it. I was finding it nearly impossible not to do something that would distract me from the fact that I was feeling tender and wounded. I wanted to do something phenomenally stupid, like call my ex. Which is why it was such horrible timing that Jared chose that morning to call me. I'd given him my number, in a friendly sort of way, days before. I'd saved his into my cell at the time, so I knew right away who was calling me. We were outside, and the boys were playing in their treehouse. They were playing the usual treehouse game, where Ivan attacked the treehouse with an invisible army, and Matt and I had to defend. This usually involved me sitting in the cramped little wooden structure, pointing out of the opening, and firing my finger at a worked-up Ivan about every 3 minutes, while Matt did all of the groundwork, basically spazzing out in a circle around the tree. Often, I found this highly entertaining, since the boys seemed to have a ridiculous amount of knowledge about warfare, courtesy of cable. Today, though,
I was just phoning it in, pointing my finger and shooting on cue with little enthusiasm. Luckily, it seemed to make no difference to a 6- and an 8-year-old. I stared at my phone for a long moment when it began to ring, and I saw who it was, but I answered, wanting a distraction, even a self-destructive one. I supposed that Jared was a better option than my ex. "Hello, Jared," I answered. "Hey, Danika. Listen, I know you said you weren't up for a date or anything yet, but I was thinking we could just go to dinner. Just a friendly dinner, nothing fancy. How does that sound?" It sounded like a date. Did I care? Not just then. I knew it was shitty, since he was Tristan's brother, but I wanted so badly to just be distracted for an evening, distracted from Jared's brother in particular. I told myself that would be enough to help me stop thinking about Tristan. Some corner of my brain even acknowledged that I also wanted badly to be able to tell Tristan that I had plans if he wanted to do something that night, or even if he didn't. So I had a crush on Tristan, so what? It had developed quickly, and I swore that it would fade even faster. Jared was still talking, his tone cajoling, as he tried to make it sound like he wasn't asking me out on a date. "Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. But it will have to be a late dinner," I interrupted. "Great. Perfect." He sounded pleased, but surprised. "What time should I pick you up?" I chewed on my lip as I thought about it. 9 o'clock should be good, but I'd rather meet up somewhere. "That works. Is there a place you'd prefer for dinner?" "Chipotle." That sounds very informal. It's not a date, right? Nothing fancy, you said? He laughed, and it reminded me so much of Tristan that I wanted to cry. Fine. That works. Aren't you close to the Belts Mall? How about we meet up at the Chipotle over there? Sounds good. I'll see you then. I was just hanging up when I caught sight of the sliding glass door opening. A rough-looking Tristan stepped outside. He was the picture of remorse as he approached me, giving me an endearing smile that made my heart twist. "I slept in. I didn't mean to. I promised you breakfast. How can I make it up to you?" I shook my head, waving that off and trying not to feel horrible about going out with his brother. All of my reactions were off when it came to Tristan. I should not have felt so broken up about the fact that he had slept with some random girl last night, and I should not feel guilty about spending time with his brother. But, strictly friends or not, I felt both. "I am fully capable of making breakfast," I told him. "I know, but I still wish I hadn't slept in. I like doing nice things for you. I like spoiling you. I like doing anything at all for you, as long as it makes you smile." I looked down, pretending to study my phone, blinking back ridiculous tears. "What would you like to do tonight?" he asked, moving as close as he could get to me through the opening in the treehouse. "I'm getting my car back today, so we can go anywhere. I'll let you pick this time, and I'll drive. We'll go wherever you like, and I'll treat." I swallowed. "I have plans, actually. Maybe another night." It hadn't felt nearly as good as I thought it would to turn him down. "Oh?" he inquired, still smiling. "Another girls' night so soon?" "No, not that. That's not for a few days. I'm just going out. With a friend." "A friend? Just one? She can come with us, or I could tag along with you." "It's not like that. It's just a dinner thing, with a friend. Just the two of us." His smile died, his brows drawing together, though his expression was still just curious. "Who's this friend?" I shrugged. "Is this a girlfriend or a guy friend?" he asked, just as though he had the right. I cleared my throat. "It's a guy, though it's not a big deal. Like I said, we're just going out to dinner." He nodded, rubbing his jaw and looking at his feet. "It's not your ex, is it?" he asked quietly, his voice low. "It's not. I rushed to answer, a little defensive because I had considered that idea, albeit briefly. "Just a friend, huh?" he asked blandly. "Yep." "So why does it have to be just the two of you? That seems more like a date to me." I felt my temper rise a bit. "What if it was a date? Would there be something wrong with that?" He moved into the small opening, bringing his face close. I was sitting cross-legged, and his hand found my knee, squeezing lightly. "I thought you said you weren't going to date for a while. Didn't Lucy tell you that you should avoid that for now? And didn't you agree with her?" "I thought we agreed we weren't going to nag each other. Wasn't that on our stupid list?" "There's a difference between nagging and expressing concern." "Now you sound like Lucy," I said dryly. "Who is this guy you're going out with tonight? Why have I never heard about these plans until today?" I hated, absolutely despised that he sounded like a concerned parent just then. "How about we add this to our list? I don't get to ask you about who you fucked last night, and you don't get to ask me who I go out with." He looked around, eyes wide. "Watch the language. The kids." The boys had moved on as soon as we'd started having grown-up talk. They were currently wrestling with Pupcake in the sandbox by the fence. "You should fucking talk," I pointed out sharply. "I've gotten better, haven't I?" He had a point. He'd improved his language around the kids faster than anyone could have predicted. "Fine, I'll drop it," he said, his tone dark. "What time is he picking you up?" "I'm meeting him somewhere at 9. "That seems late. And he can't even be bothered to pick you up? You can do better, Boo." "You're an ass," I told him, taking exception to the bite in his tone. "It was my idea to meet up." "Hiding him from me? You worried I'll scare him off?" I let out a noise of frustration through my teeth, wanting to throttle him. "Sorry, I am being an ass. I'm just feeling, I don't know, overprotective. The thought of you being alone with some strange guy makes me worry." "Well, don't. Where I'm concerned, all the damage has already been done. There's nothing left to protect me from." He'd begun to back off, but at my words, he moved close again, studying my face, that big warm hand back on my leg. "What on earth does that mean?" I blinked rapidly. I couldn't believe I'd said something like that. And to him. Already there was sympathy in his voice, enough sympathy to have me blinking back tears. I hated sympathy, but was somehow always strongly affected by it. "It's nothing. Certainly nothing you want to hear about." "I certainly do. Please. I want to know just what you meant by that. What damage has already been done?" "All of it," I thought. "Nothing," I said. He didn't buy that for a second. "We're friends. You can tell me anything." I mulled that over. Was that true? I was in a mood to find out. "Promise you won't feel sorry for me?" I whispered, my eyes on the kids, making sure they were out of trouble and out of earshot. "I promise," he whispered back, his other hand reaching into the treehouse opening and pulling at my shoulder to tug me further out. I let him, not even protesting when he had my legs out, his chest pressed against my bent knees. "Tell me." I grimaced. "It's nothing, really. It's old news, and not even that big of a deal. It's just, you never have to be protective of me. I can take care of myself, and even if I can't, I know from experience that I'll survive it. Whatever it is." "I don't like the sound of that," he said softly, one of his hands moving into my hair. Gently, he turned my head to look at him. "What the hell does it mean? Did someone hurt you? Are you talking about your ex? Do I need to go and hurt him?" I shook my head. He was a mistake, and a royal asshole, but no, that's not what I meant. Though you can't protect me from assholes either. That's my choice to make. What I mean is that I'm not some innocent kid. I haven't been innocent in a very long time, So don't go thinking that you need to protect me as though I am. Is that really what you think? That only innocents deserve protection? The bastard had pulled a Lucy on me. Is that really what I thought? As I considered the question, I realized that I did, at least as it pertained to me. I was embarrassed by my realization, but it didn't change my thinking. My issues were too deeply ingrained for that. I shrugged, turning my head to look away from him. He didn't let me, bringing his other hand to tip my chin up. "Will you tell me what happened?" he asked, something in his tone making me think that he already knew. "I will," I allowed, "but not right now, okay?" He didn't look happy about that, but he nodded, his hands dropping away. Chapter 18. I didn't know who was more out of sorts after that. I had effectively spread my black mood to Tristan, and we steered clear of each other for hours. I was slipping my feet into my tennis shoes, getting ready to take the dogs for a walk, when Tristan approached me with a cajoling smile. That smile was nothing but trouble. "I just got a call to do a promoting job tonight. Come with me. It'll be fun. You can go out with what's-his-name some other night." I glared at him, snapping the dogs into their leashes. He took Coffee Cup and Pupcake's leashes, unfazed by my hostility. I let him, not speaking until we'd nearly circled the block. "I'm not changing my plans tonight." "Well, how late are you planning to stay out? You could come by the club after you're done." "Stop," I said quietly, my expression hard. "Why are you pushing this?" "Are you really going to be out that late? What exactly are your plans?" "Just stop!" I nearly shouted, angry now, at him, at both of us. "You don't get to go out and do whatever the hell you want and then ask me what I'm doing." He gripped my arm just above the elbow, stopping me. "Is that what this is? Are you mad at me about last night? Is this revenge?" "Why would this be revenge? How could it be revenge? We're just friends, right? We're still sticking to that little list, right?" He nodded, studying me. He looked worried. "You are mad at me. Fuck, Danika, I'm sorry if I hurt—" "Don't," I interrupted him. "I'm not hurt. I'm just fine. But we need to establish some boundaries here. You can go fuck whoever you want whenever you damn well please, but you don't get to keep tabs on me just because I'm a girl. That's not happening." His jaw clenched, and he let go of my arm. He didn't say another word about it, but if I thought he was in a foul mood earlier, it was nothing compared to the dark mood that conversation put him in. He went out before I did that night. I was still getting ready when he left. He'd barely said a word to me, barely looked at me since we walked the dogs. He barely looked at me now, just hovered in the doorway of my bathroom while I put on makeup. "Be careful, boo, and call me if you need me." He left before I could respond. I wore cuffed navy shorts and a sleeveless magenta bib-style silk shirt. A pair of flip-flops made it a casual look. I twisted my black hair into a smooth chignon at my nape. Smoky eyes and soft pink lips was the extent of my makeup. I wanted to look nice, but I certainly didn't want to go overboard and give him the wrong impression. Jared's reaction when he saw me was enough to make me flush in pleasure. "You look amazing," he said, swallowing. "You're so beautiful." The brothers sure know how to make a girl feel good about herself. Jared looked pretty good himself, in just a black t-shirt and jeans. He had the skinny rocker hunk look down pat. Aside from his build, he reminded me so much of Tristan that it made my heart twist just to look at him. Dinner was friendly enough. I bombarded him with questions about the band I was so curious about. Everything about Tristan fascinated me, and the fact that he was in a band, and I'd met most of its members, but still hadn't heard them play, consumed an unhealthy amount of my thoughts. Tristan didn't share much about the band, but his amiable brother was more than happy to. Dean is putting together some gigs for us soon.
Do you have to call them gigs? Isn't there a less douchey alternative to calling it a gig? He laughed richly, reminding me so much of his brother.
We have some performances coming up. Is that better?
Yes. Am I invited?
Of course you are.
Will you tell me when they're happening?
I will, though I'm sure Tristan will tell you first.
Will you be sure to tell me anyway, in case Tristan doesn't?
Okay. Are you two fighting or something?
No. Why?
I just got that feeling. And just so we're clear, you two still aren't dating, right?
Still not dating, I said through my teeth, not sure how I felt about the whole thing. Nothing sucked worse than having feelings for someone who just may have been your best friend, especially when that someone clearly didn't return those feelings.
I'm sure you know this, but Tristan warned me, ordered me, rather, not to ask you out.
I know.
Normally I'd respect that, but if you two aren't dating or hooking up, I thought he was completely out of line, so I ignored him.
I know, I said with a smile, though something in my gut twisted at the notion. Would Tristan have warned his brother off if he wasn't at all interested? But then again, I'd always known he was attracted to me. He'd never made a secret of that. So I know this isn't a date, he continued with that engaging smile that ran in the family. But maybe sometime, down the road, when you're dating again, we can go on a date. Maybe, I allowed, returning his smile. So there's this party tonight, some big house party. Want to go? I don't think so. I won't know anybody. You'll know me, and you'll meet some of my friends. Have you met Dean? I haven't. I'd almost met the band's mysterious fifth member a few times, but it had never actually happened. Well, it's your lucky night. He'll be there. And this cool chick Frankie will be there. She's a tattoo artist, and she's getting her own reality show, so she'll be famous soon. I bet you two will love each other. She'll hit on you because you're gorgeous, but that's to be expected. I don't think it's a good idea. Don't you think Tristan will be pissed if he finds out we're hanging out? I went out of my way not to tell him who I was going out with tonight. Jared shrugged, unconcerned. Who will tell him? He's working tonight, so he won't be coming, and I can guarantee Dean won't say a word. If we run into anyone else, I doubt they'd make the connection between you and him. So he's still staying with you, huh? I can't believe his apartment isn't ready yet. That gave me pause. Not that the apartment wasn't ready, but the fact that I'd never given a thought to how long he'd been at the house. And some part of my brain had even forgotten that he was supposed to be leaving soon. Originally, he'd only been staying for a week, but that week had come and gone in a flash. We can just go for a little bit, he cajoled. It's only 20 minutes away. I'll drive, and I'll bring you back to your car whenever you ask. It's a pool party. We can go swimming. I promise it'll be fun. I did have a suit in the car, packed for my last excursion to decadence. Do you mind if we just go for an hour or so? I asked. He took that as my capitulation, and his smile widened. That sounds perfect. We wound up somewhere in the west of the Strip, and what he called a house party was held in a gated estate that I don't think anyone could have called just a house. I'm not sure exactly where, but someone told me James Cavendish has a place just down the street. Frankie, the tattoo artist you're going to meet, is actually good friends with him. The reality show she's starring in will be in his casino. Really? I asked, impressed. Yes, and like I said, you're going to love her. She's a blast. Are you sure we're dressed for this? I asked him as he pulled his black Mustang through a set of intimidating gates. Oh, yeah. Half of these people will be wearing swimsuits, so we just might be overdressed. I'd stuffed my bikini into my purse, but I glanced at his hands as we made our way past closely parked cars in the huge building at the center of the property. Do you have a suit? He grinned. Already wearing it. Under my jeans. You had this all planned out. I observed. I had my hopes. The place was packed, and the setup reminded me of a frat party more than anything, which surprised me, considering that it was held at the biggest mansion I'd ever seen. People were walking around in swimsuits, holding red plastic cups. I was instantly more at ease. My first impression of the place had been intimidating, but I could deal with plastic cups and a pool party, no matter the swanky location. Still, it was hard to even get through the room. There were so many people. "How will you find anyone in this crush?" I asked Jared, having to lean into him and speak directly into his ear to be heard. He shrugged. "Let's get to the pool. We'll either see them or we won't." It took some searching, but Jared found me an empty room to change. Luckily, my small outfit fit into my purse. I was just debating about where to stash it when Jared opened the door a crack, peeking his head in. "Want to stash your purse in my trunk? We can just go around the house to get to the pool, so we won't have to swim through the crowd twice." "Good idea," I said, following him. He snagged my hand as he navigated us back through the crush of people. Tristan held my hand all the time, but for some reason, I felt like I shouldn't let Jared do it. I didn't protest, though, telling myself I was being silly. We stashed my purse in his trunk, making our way toward the back of the house by way of a paved path. I was surprised when Jared stopped us at the side of the house, pulling me into a darkened alcove. He pulled me close, and I didn't protest, closing my eyes and tilting my head back. I let him kiss me, shivering as he ran light fingers along my bare back. He was a good kisser, his lips soft on mine. He wasn't forceful at all, just cajoling, and I found myself thinking about how Tristan's kiss had been, how it had demanded more from me than I'd known I'd wanted to give, and how I'd wanted to give more than I could afford to. Even thinking about another man the whole time, though, I could see that Jared knew what he was doing. Still, it felt wrong, and I found myself quickly regretting it. This was Tristan's brother, and as much as I wished that I didn't, I had feelings for Tristan, and this was wrong. It was a nice kiss, but that was all. Just nice was nothing like what I felt for Tristan, which meant that the kiss, as meaningless as it was giving the wrong impression. I couldn't date Jared. It was naive of me to even have considered it. I pulled back. "I'm sorry," I told him quietly. "We shouldn't." "I know," he said with a smile. "This isn't a date. Still, I had to try." I rolled my eyes, less worried about leading him on after that statement. "That came out wrong. What I meant was, I like you. A lot. I think about you way too often, and I'd like to spend more time with you. I won't try that again, not until you want me to." I sighed, hating what I had to admit, but knowing that it was the only fair thing to do. "I don't think we can ever date, Jared. Tristan and I are just friends, that was the truth. But I do have feelings for him, which makes this wrong." Even in the dim light, I could see his mouth tighten and his brows draw together, but he nodded. Okay, I understand. Please don't tell Tristan that I said that. He doesn't know." "Of course." We suffered through a long, awkward silence before he spoke again. "Do you still want to swim?" "Yes, if you do." "Yeah, I still want to be friends. All of the stuff with Tristan doesn't change that. We're friends, right?" I smiled, which drew a small smile from him. "Yes, we're friends." Chapter 19. The backyard of the mansion was just as impressive as the front, and the pool was colossal, but it wasn't our first destination. We fell into the line that led to the margarita bar. I was ready for one, after that awkward conversation. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm sorry," Jared said at the same time. We smiled at each other. "I won't make this awkward," Jared said quietly. "Good. Thank you. I hate awkward." "Agreed," Jared said. As he spoke, a very pretty blonde man clapped him on the shoulder from behind. Jared turned to see who had grabbed him and grinned.
"Mean Dean," he said, his tone laced with affection. Mean Dean was gorgeous, in a pretty boy sort of way. In fact, I'd have said he was the prettiest man I'd ever seen, if I'd never laid eyes on James fucking Cavendish. Dean was just a few inches taller than me, and lean bordering on slender, even compared to Jared. I doubted he had a six-pack, like the brothers, but his face was his attraction. Almost white blonde hair, tan skin, cornflower blue eyes, and the face of an angel would have made anyone do a double take. Still, right from the beginning, there was something I didn't like about his smile. He grinned at Jared, stepping closer to us. Someone behind us made a loud comment about him cutting into the line, but he pretended not to hear. "Glad you could make it, Diet T." Jared stiffened at the nickname. I raised my brows, instantly curious. These guys and their nicknames. "What does Diet T mean?" I asked. Dean turned a rather greasy smile on me. "Have you met his brother? Isn't Jared like the diet version of Trist? Skinnier, less handsome, less smart, less talented? So we call him Diet T." Jared looked uncomfortable. And just that easily, Dean went right to my shit list. "And what's your nickname?" I asked Dean. "I'm Mean Dean. And who are you, my lovely?" "I'm Danika. Where does Mean Dean come from? Sounds like they went easy on you in the nickname department." "I don't remember how the nickname started. So, you're Danika. I've heard about you. Going out with both of the brothers, huh? I think I just thought up your nickname. We'll call you Number 1, because you're the band's first groupie." As he spoke, he gripped Jared's hand, and I saw a small baggie pass from one man to the other. I was irate, for more than one reason. "Quit being an ass," Jared muttered to his friend. "Oh, relax. I'm only joking," Dean said. It was pretty easy to see where the Mean Dean nickname had come from. He was a vicious motherfucker. But then again, so was I, if provoked. "You're awfully clever for a drug dealer," I told him, my smile sweet, my tone not so much. His grin only widened. "I'm not a drug dealer if I'm giving it away. Want some, Number 1? "No, thank you," I said through my teeth, stifling the urge to make up a rude nickname for him. There's nothing more immature than name-calling, I told myself firmly. "So, you're just a drug pusher, not a dealer. That's much better." Dean looked at Jared, still smiling. "She's feisty. I like that. When do I get my turn with her?" "Sorry, I'm not into chicks," I told him, deadpan. That killed his grin and widened mine. "She's got a point," a laughing female voice said from behind me. "Dean is almost pretty enough to interest me." I turned to see a petite, black-haired girl with doll-like features. Her makeup was heavy, ran toward goth, and she was covered in tats, but it was obvious that she had a very pretty face and a pretty smile. "Finally gonna take me up on my offer, Frankie?" Dean asked. I said almost, Dean, and almost isn't enough for me to deal with a penis. Frankie held out a hand to me, giving me a very warm look. "Danika, Tristan told me about you. Nice to meet you. I'm Frankie." I shook her hand, trying to smile, though I still wanted to punch Dean in the face. "Nice to meet you. Jared was just telling me about your reality show." She wiggled her brows at me, her smile self-deprecating. "Hopefully it doesn't bomb." "I'm sure it won't," I reassured her, "especially if it's at the Cavendish Casino. That place is hot right now." "Let's hope you're right. You've probably seen some of my work. I've done almost all of the ink on Tristan's back, and his arms, and I've done quite a bit of Jared's, too. Whenever he's done having a private chat with Dean, I'll show you." I glanced over to where the two men had been, and saw that they'd moved several feet away and were speaking quietly to each other. "Jared's great, but Dean can be a pain," Frankie said, her voice pitched low. I nodded. I thought that was putting it nicely. "So, do you have any ink?" I shook my head, reading from her smile where she was going with the question. Is there anything you really want? I'd be happy to help you make all of your tattoo dreams come true. I chewed on my lip. I had been thinking about that, especially recently. Something about staring at Tristan's tattoos way too often had made me start to want my own. I've toyed with the idea of getting a little cherry blossom branch on my back. Her grin widened. She clearly sensed a victory. We'll have to work on that. I'll show you some of my designs that will blow your mind. You won't even have to let my camera crew tape it. Though I'd love it if you did. I blanched. TV? I don't know. It's not as bad as all that. Just think about it. My eyes narrowed on her. You do this all the time, don't you? She shrugged, a very engaging twinkle in her eye. I love putting my mark on beautiful people. Call it a personal quirk. Tristan's ink is the best I've seen. Why, thank you. Have you seen Jared's? I haven't gotten a close look at any of it. But you have gotten a close look at Tristan's. Interesting. I shrugged, my mouth twisting wryly. I don't know if interesting is the word. Frustrating would be more apt. She laughed. She started to say something, but it was interrupted by some woman behind me loudly calling her name. I turned to see a blonde woman descending on us. She was Vegas pretty, with hair bleached platinum blonde, a face that reminded me a bit of a Bratz doll, and bombshell curves that no one could have mistaken for natural. Still, she filled out her pink bikini in a way that would have made any straight guy look twice. Frankie smiled at the woman, but there was a noticeable chill in her eye that hadn't been there before. Nautilly, Frankie said. Long time no see. What are you doing here? She pronounced the Natalie strangely, the as made into Oz. I guessed that Nautilly was one of those women that tried to make a pretty normal name sound exotic, but it just came out sounding a little stupid. Frankie, I can't tell you how excited I was when I heard you were getting your own show. I've been dying to talk to you. Oh, yeah? Frankie asked, disinterest practically pouring off her in waves. Well, I've been wanting to get a tattoo for ages. Really? Frankie was clearly skeptical. And I think it would be great for my career to have it done on your show. Career? Frankie asked. I've gotten into modeling, Nautilly said smugly. Only in Vegas, I thought. Nautilly was a good 3 inches shorter than me, which made her unlikely model material, no matter how pretty she was. I take it you and Howard didn't work out? Nautilly shrugged. We're still seeing each other. Nothing exclusive anymore, but he's been good to me, and I won't forget it. Sure, yeah. It was so obvious to me that Frankie couldn't stand the woman, but Nautilly seemed oblivious to it. Nautilly's gaze sharpened on something behind Frankie, and I'd have sworn it turned predatory. Is that Jared Vega? She asked softly. Frankie didn't bother to hide her eye roll. It is. Is Tristan around? Those two are usually inseparable. Frankie's smile was just a flash of teeth. Nope. Damn, I needed to talk to him. You could always call him, Frankie offered. Nautilly flushed. I don't have his number. Could I get it from you? Sorry, can't do that. I'll let him know you wanted to talk to him if you want. Fine, Nautilly said, her tone dismissive, then abruptly walked away. That was interesting, I said, wondering what to make of the blonde woman. She hadn't been openly rude, just strange. Nautilly wouldn't know how to be anything but self-serving. A lot of conversations with her end like that. When you're no longer useful to her, she just walks away. I said. She's a gold digger. You know the type. What she said about her ex, Howard, says it all. That was gold digger code for, we're not dating, but I give him a blowjob every time he pays my bills. Howard is almost 60 years old, by the way. Yuck, I said.
watching the bombshell blonde approaching Jared and Dean.
She has to still be in her 20s.
She is, and that's not even the worst of it. The whole story is just awful. She was Tristan's high school sweetheart. That made my heart twist painfully in my chest. The fact that he won't date, that he only hooks up, is at least partially because of that twat, Frankie said. That word made the side of my mouth kick up in spite of the way her statement made me feel.
Twaddly made him like that?
Frankie threw back her head and laughed.
Oh, I like you.
Yes, she did. Or at least I blame her. Twaddly started seeing Howard when she still had Tristan's ring on her finger. I went from mildly disliking Naughty to openly hating her guts with that one sentence. I couldn't have said which made me hate her more, the fact that she'd been engaged to Tristan, or the fact that she'd cheated on him. That twat, I said softly. Exactly, Frankie agreed. We reached the front of the line, and a very friendly bartender got me 2 margaritas and an entire tray of tequila shots for Frankie. I eyed up the shots dubiously.
Please tell me those aren't all for you.
She shrugged. For us. I don't like to drink alone. How hard do you think it'll be to get Jared away from his pretty boyfriend? I glanced over at the 2 men. Naughty was gone, but they hadn't stopped talking quietly to each other. They don't look like they want to be disturbed. Well then, let's start without him. He'll find us when he's done. We hopped into a shallow corner of the pool, setting the drinks on the edge. She talked me into a tequila shot, and I downed it with a grimace. So, I know that Tristan had to work tonight. Does he know that you're here with his brother? He doesn't. Be careful about that. I know you aren't dating, but it feels messy to me. Those 2 are close. It would be a pity to drive a wedge between them. I sighed. I know. I thought about dating Jared, but I've decided tonight that it's not happening. It just feels wrong. I don't want to come between them, and I don't want to lead Jared on. Have you told Jared that? He seems to be sporting a big crush. I told him. It was awkward, but he was very nice about it. He's the nicest guy in the world, but I worry about him. That surprised me, but before I even asked, I knew what she was referring to. Why? I worry about both of the Vega brothers, but I especially worry about Jared. He's just too open to anything, you know? He doesn't seem to have a slow down button when it comes to drugs and alcohol. Neither of them do. But Tristan at least sticks mainly to booze. I don't think there's anything Jared hasn't tried, and at some point, you can't just call it all experimenting. Does Tristan know? Frankie sighed, looking like a worried mother in spite of her age. He knows. He'll be the first to say it's normal to try things. When you're smoking joints with your mother before you're 12, it's hard to get perspective about it. I grimaced. I went to dinner at her house and saw some of that. I'm a total prude about drugs, and I know they're grown-ups now, but that raised some red flags for me. Don't get me wrong, I love that woman to death, but that's just messed up. And it isn't even the half of it. Dean handed Jared a baggie of something the second he showed up, I told her, my voice pitched low, since Jared was approaching the pool. See, now that shit worries me. Dean will get him anything he wants, with no thought to what's good for him. And I guarantee that wasn't just a baggie of weed. We dropped the subject as Jared joined us in the pool, and Frankie went over every piece of ink she'd done on his skin, which was considerable. Mama's boy. I teased him gently when she pointed out a tattoo for his mom that he'd done on his chest. It was an anchor, with the word mother etched into it. I thought it said a lot that he'd chosen an anchor to represent his mom, though to me, it said something far different than what he thought it did. Lucy had trained me to look for signs of codependency, and permanently marking your body with the fact that someone was dragging you down was about as obvious as it got. Absolutely. Until the day I die, I'll be a mama's boy. She's my best friend. In spite of my reservations, a little awe escaped me at such sweet words coming out of a grown man. Tristan is a mama's boy, too, but not as bad as this one, Frankie told me,
as she ran her hands down Jared's abs, tracing over the scaled dragon she'd done. My brow furrowed as I studied the intricate dragon. It was golden, and so elaborate that I had to study it carefully to catch all of the details. It was a lot like one she'd done on Tristan's shoulder, but Jared's dragon had one extra quirk that made me roll my eyes. "Is that dragon smoking a joint or a cigarette?" I asked, my tone wry. "Guess," Jared said playfully. "Well, half of it is in the water," I complained. "Here." He hopped out of the pool, perching on the edge so I had a better view. I moved close, getting between his legs to study the smoking dragon. "I can't believe you put a dragon smoking a joint on his stomach," I said to Frankie, my tone accusing, when I saw for certain what it was. I tried to talk him out of the joint, but he insisted. There's also a marijuana leaf on his hip, though that wasn't me. I explained to him that people almost always regret drug tattoos. When he's older, with kids of his own, he'll never be able to tell them to say no to drugs without looking like a hypocrite. I won't tell them to say no. I'll be a cool-ass dad. See, now, everyone says that. Until they have children, Frankie explained. Your priorities will change, I guarantee it. I glanced up at Jared when he had no response to her statement. He was looking towards the house, an expression of frozen panic on his face. I knew who it was before I turned to look. My hands fell from Jared's stomach, where they'd been innocently tracing a tattoo. "Fuck, he's going to kill me," Jared said softly. Tristan had arrived, and he was striding towards us with a look on his face I'd never seen before. Chapter 20. Tristan didn't even spare me a glance, his cold eyes all for his brother. The color gold had never looked so icy. He barely paused when he reached us. "A word, Jared," he said tersely, striding right past us. Jared ran a hand over his damp, inky black hair, his expression tight. "Wish me luck, ladies," he uttered softly, before following his brother. "This is an unfortunate development," Frankie said, watching the brothers stride away. "He wasn't supposed to be here," I defended. "You're right. I wonder how he found out about you guys being here together." "You think he came here because someone told him?" "He had a club promoting job tonight, right? Something compelling brought him here, and you and Jared showing up together is the only thing that comes to mind." "But I don't even know anyone here. Who would have told him?" "It looks like me and Dean are the only possibilities, and I didn't rat you out. I'll be getting hell for that later, by the way." "Fucking Dean," I said darkly. "Fucking Dean," Frankie agreed. "They've all been friends since they were kids, but I can't stand Dean. He's always rubbed me the wrong way. He's just too slick. You'll notice he disappeared right before the shit hit the fan." It was several minutes before Tristan approached us again, and this time it was without Jared. "Where'd your brother go?" I asked him, searching the crowd. I saw no sign of Jared. Tristan crouched down near the edge of the pool, looking meaner than I'd ever seen him. "He went home. Can we talk, Danika?" It was the tone he used, as much as the words, that made a shiver of dread go through me. I'd never seen him like this. I moved to the side of the pool and began to climb out. "Hey, Tristan!" Frankie called out, her voice friendly. "I didn't expect to see you at this thing." "Hey, Frankie. It's pretty apparent that nobody did." As he spoke, he helped me out of the pool. "Do you have a towel?" he asked, his tone still as hostile as I'd ever heard it. I shook my head, feeling a little numb. "Are you cold?" he asked, solicitous, even in a rage. I shook my head again. It was hot as a hairdryer outside, and even the pool hadn't been enough to cool me off. I didn't realize that we were leaving the party until Tristan called out, "Talk to you later, Frankie," as we walked away. He snagged me a white towel off a huge pile of folded ones near the house.
I wrapped myself in it, following him silently. I was torn between feeling guilty about going out with Jared and being pissed about the way he was acting. He had no right, but I had as good as lied to him by not telling him who I was going out with. I followed Tristan through the house and out the back door. He was opening the passenger door of a black Camaro before I spoke again. "I can't take the towel," I argued, glancing back at the mansion. It seemed like such a trashy thing to do, to take advantage of the mysterious homeowner's hospitality. His jaw clenched, and he just stood there, staring at me and holding the door open. I got in, stealing the stupid towel. He closed the door softly behind me. He drove for a solid 5 minutes before either of us spoke. "Is this your car?" I asked. He gave one short nod as an answer. The next stretch of silence was very nearly unbearable. I felt my heart pounding in my chest while I waited to see what he had to say. My thoughts were a little manic, going from wanting to chew him out, followed by the strong urge to apologize. The last thing in the world that I wanted to do was come between brothers. But on the other hand, I could argue that I wasn't coming between them, since Tristan and I were supposed to be platonic. I was at war with myself, at war with my own innate logic and my out-of-control emotions. Tristan had that effect on me. "I just have 2 questions, and then I'll drop it." His rough voice in the darkness made me jump. "Oh, okay." I hated the weak thread of my voice. "Was all of this because you were upset about last night?" I cringed. That was just the question I hadn't wanted, because finding the answer required me to be brutally honest with myself. "In part, it was," I finally answered. "I wanted a distraction from you." "Okay. I wish you had just told me that." "Second question, are you really interested in my brother?" I breathed a sigh of relief. That one I could answer honestly and easily. "Jared is great, but I already told him I couldn't date him. I don't have those kinds of feelings for him." Tristan exhaled noisily, then fell silent. We didn't speak again until we were back at the house, and then only to say a brief goodnight. Tristan slept on the couch, and I felt vaguely like I was being punished. I tossed and turned all night. He was gone by the time I woke up the next morning. I stewed about his absence all day, especially since he didn't call or text me once. I fell asleep quickly that night, exhausted from the bad night of sleep the evening before. I was so relieved I wanted to cry when I found him sleeping on the couch the next morning. Ivan and Matt had slept over at a friend's house down the street, and so the house was quiet as a tomb. I tiptoed away silently, letting him sleep. There weren't many mornings in this house where it was peaceful enough to sleep in, and it was a pity to spoil one of them. I decided to go swimming. I shunned my black one-piece again, donning my bronze bikini. It was a silly thing to wear to swim laps, but my pride won out for that one. I had lost track of the number of laps I'd done when I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I swam to the side of the pool, clinging to it as Tristan approached. He was already wearing black swim trunks. The look on his face could only be described as repentant. He dove into the pool in a mouth-watering display, swimming straight to me. He crowded me against the side. "I was a complete ass the other day," he said quietly, earnestly. He kept moving close until we were nearly hugging. "Forgive me?" I didn't even hesitate, just nodding as I watched him steadily. He bent down, wrapping his arms around me. I threw my arms around his neck, hugging him back. His arms tightened until we were pressed close. He just held me like that, for a long time. No funny business, just good old-fashioned holding. "Did you and Jared make up too?" I asked into his ear. He pulled back, and I was sorry I'd broken the spell. "We did. He was pissed at me, but we're good now. It didn't hurt that you'd already shot him down." "He told you that?" "He did." "Is that true?" "Yes, I already told you that." He grinned his most troublesome grin, a mixture of joy, mischief, and the best dimples in the world. It was the smile that got me every time. He swooped me up in a cradle hold, moving to the pool stairs. I should have seen it coming, but a shriek of surprise escaped my lips as he threw me back in the water with a happy laugh. I came up sputtering. "You made me do a side flop. That hurt." "You could always pay me back and throw me in." It was stupid, but I tried. I only ended up pushing him in and following closely behind. He threw me over his shoulders. I shrieked and started slapping at him when he carried me to the diving board and started bouncing. "You weigh too much to be doing that," I yelled at him. "We're going to break this thing." He threw me in, and I surfaced in a fit of uncontrollable giggles. "You're out of control," I scolded him, backstroking away from him. He followed with a wicked smile. "What's gotten into you?" I asked him as he crowded me into the corner of the pool. He kissed me, and the world disappeared. It was a hair-pulling, legs-wrapping, mouth-bruising, earth and soul-shattering kind of kiss. I'd wanted him from the moment I'd laid eyes on him, but something integral inside of me changed with that kiss. I needed him, needed something that our relationship did for me, and I decided with that kiss to stop being such a pussy about it. He curved his mouth over mine again and again, deep, sweet, drugging pulls that only made me crave more. My arms were around his neck, my legs around his waist. Before I even realized I had moved, I shifted until his thick erection was nestled in just the perfect spot. His chest moved with an unsteady breath, a soft, rough, dark sound escaping from his throat and into my mouth. I responded with a soft whimper, circling my hips against him. He felt so big, probably bigger than I'd have wanted to handle if I was in my right mind. But my right mind had gone on vacation for this. One of his big hands moved to my ass, holding me in place as he grinded against me. The other moved up my side and over my ribs, hovering just below my quivering breast. With an impatient little moan, I reached down and pulled it up over my breast. He cupped my flesh, then kneaded softly. He pulled back, but before I could protest, he was perching me on the edge of the pool, his head buried between my breasts. He peeled the material of my bikini aside with his teeth, sucking my nipple into his mouth. I gripped his head, trying to get a good handful, but it was too short. "You need longer hair," I gasped. He grunted, turning his head, kissing his way to the other side. His mouth was hot on mine, and I writhed at the contact. We were both panting when he pulled back. The second his head left my hands, I leaned back on my arms, trying to remember how to make my brain work again. He gave me very steady eye contact. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low and rich. I nodded at him to go on, far past the ability to think myself. His hands moved to my stomach, and he started rubbing and then kneading my sides and my waist. I trembled as he kneaded deep into the muscle tissue just below my navel. "I have an idea," he offered, one big hand dipping to rub at my hip, caressing the flesh inside and down. I let out an unsteady breath as his hand skimmed past all of the rest and began to rub my inner thigh. I squirmed, my legs falling open for him. "Do you want to hear it?" he asked, stepping away. I just watched him as he moved to grab one of the long floats that was lying along the side of the pool. "Do you?" he asked, and I couldn't have guessed what he was asking about to save my life. "What?" I asked. "Do you want to hear my idea?" he repeated, pulling the float to me. He showed no visible strain as he lifted me onto the rolling surface. He pushed me to my back on the inflatable plastic with a firm hand, and I gasped as water splashed into my lap and onto my stomach with the movement. "Yes," I said raggedly. "I don't like relationships," he explained. "You don't," I agreed. "And you don't like casual sex," he continued.
I don't. So let's try this. I get you off, that's all. It's perfectly innocent. You won't feel used, and we stay friends. My brain felt too fuzzy just then to argue with the twisted logic he was using. My brows drew together, and I latched onto the biggest gap in his argument. What do you get out of it? He smiled his best smile, the one that ruined me for every other smile in the world. I had it worse than I'd realized until just that moment. I've become obsessed with the idea of making you come, ever since you told me that no one could get you off. I said hadn't, not couldn't, I argued. What's the difference? The difference is that you weren't supposed to take it as a challenge. Well, ever since then, it's all I can think about. I've even been dreaming about it. And the other morning when we woke up like that? As he'd been speaking, I'd started to regain some brain function, but it went away again in a little puff of smoke when he mentioned that wake-up session. He swallowed hard, his hands moving to rub my stomach, water splashing over the sides of the float and hitting me in gentle waves with his movements. When I helped you pleasure yourself, well, I thought I was obsessed with it before that, but it got worse. Let me get you off. Don't worry about me. I'll go take a shower when you're finished. I'm not that easy to get off, I warned him. I usually take a lot of time, and a vibrator. He lifted one of my hands to his mouth, palm first. How about a vibrating tongue? He asked, against my hand. What he did next defied all explanation for me. He moved his tongue in fast, jerky little circles on my palm. He was so fast, in fact, that it felt like vibrations. What is that? What are you doing? I asked, trying in vain to pull my hand free. Demonstrating what I'm about to do to your clit. Any objections? I couldn't think of one. He'd made a pretty spectacular promise, but he didn't start there. He began rather innocently, his hands massaging the sides of my legs. Of course, his eyes weren't innocent. My bikini was askew, the triangles still pulled aside to reveal most of each breast, and his eyes were drinking in my déshabillé. He moved one hand to my inner thigh, shifting it so he could step between my legs as his huge hands worked on one lucky thigh. You have great hands, I told him. I'm here anytime you need a masseuse, he reassured me. I need a masseuse. He gripped my hips, moving his hips between my thighs. He pulled until his hardness was nestled against my sex. Between my bikini and his swim trunks, the position left nothing to the imagination. I moaned at the contact. I could literally feel his reaction to that as his erection twitched against me. Are you going to be complaining to me about blue balls later? I asked, as he began rubbing my shoulders. I won't complain about any of this, hand to God. In fact, doing this to you has been on my bucket list for a couple of weeks now. I bet your bucket list is just full of chicks you want to go down on. He had worked down one arm and was massaging my hand. I'd never realized how much tension I carried there until he was rubbing it out of me. My eyes almost rolled back in my head. It felt so good. Nope. Getting my hands on you was the only sexual act on that list. What else is on that list? I'll tell you later. Now's not the best time. I saw what he meant as he worked his hands over my ribs and down into my navel. You have the sexiest fucking abs I've ever seen, he told me, which made a thrill of pleasure run through me. I'd been complimented by a lot of men, but Tristan always made me feel it. My heavy-lidded gaze went to his six-pack. It was dripping wet and washboard tight. You should talk. He flashed a dimple at me for one brief instant before he took his mouth to me. Neither of us did much talking after that. It was the most surreal barrage of sensations, with the sun on my front while I floated on the water, Tristan moving his hot mouth over me, his hands massaging me everywhere. His hips pushed mine underwater as he kissed my throat. I shivered, throwing my arms around his hard shoulders, trying to keep him there. He didn't cooperate, moving his lips to play at my collarbone, slipping down my body just enough to dislodge his lower half from mine, and bringing my hips back up above the waterline. I mumbled a protest. "Sweetheart, I'm not a saint," he said against my skin, his words making delicious little puffs against my skin with each word. "If my cock stays there for long, it's going to try to find a way inside." He nuzzled between my breasts, my top disappearing as though by magic. It just went poof, no sign of it anywhere that I could see. He sucked one aching tip into his mouth, his hand moving to cup the other one firmly. My entire body was trembling with anticipation by the time he made it down to my lower belly. Any self-control I may have possessed had long since evaporated. I tried to push his head down further, tried to get his tongue closer to where he'd said it was going to go, but he didn't budge an inch. I tried another tactic. "Please?" I said softly. He chuckled against my hip bone, nuzzling there. "Please won't help you now, Miss Overthinker. This isn't about letting you stay in control. This is about making you lose your mind. I say when you're ready, and I plan to take my time getting you there." I swallowed and licked my lips, watching his slow as molasses progress south. "No one's ever gone down on me before. You'll be the first." "I know, and I plan to make it good for you. I've given it just a bit of thought." "Well, could you do it sometime today?" "Demanding is an even worse idea than begging," he murmured into my skin. I felt my teeth grinding together in frustration, but that didn't last long. His mouth moved to my inner thigh, making my jaw go slack. He sucked hard at the spot between my thigh and my groin, and I just about screamed. He seemed to have insight into every sensitive nerve in my body. He removed my bikini bottoms with his teeth, pulling each knot out slowly, torturously. By the time his mouth made it to my sex, I was more primed than I'd ever been. I could literally feel the moisture seeping out of me, which was not how my body usually operated. He pushed his shoulders between my thighs, my heels digging into his back as he bent low. The position tilted my hips up and brought his face close, until I could feel him breathing into the hot core of me. I held my breath. He licked me, one deliciously long lap of his tongue, and my eyes rolled into the back of my head, my toes curling. When he started circling my clit relentlessly with his impossibly fast tongue, I lost it, writhing and whimpering, pulling at his hair, trying to grip in vain, and finally settling for gouging at the top of his shoulders with my nails. He slipped one big finger inside of me, groaning against my sensitive flesh as he pushed it in deep. He started up a smooth rhythm with his finger, while his tongue worked its magic. My vision went dark, then light, as the most delicious orgasm washed over me in voluptuous waves. It didn't stop for long minutes. Every time I thought it had stopped, another decadent tremor would rack my body. I fell apart and came back together again. My whole world thoroughly rocked. Chapter 21. "You need longer hair," was the first brilliant thing I managed to gasp, long minutes after I'd finished. He chuckled, nuzzling his face into my hip. "Longer hair. Got it. I'll add that to my to-do list." "You do that," I ordered, trying with all of my being not to sound like I'd just had my world turned upside down. "I need something to grip." "I need to go shower. Can you stand up? I don't want you falling asleep in the pool on me." He helped me slip off the float, and I could stand, if only barely. I didn't bother putting my bikini back on, just collecting the pieces while Tristan got out of the pool and wrapped a towel around his hips. He didn't look at me again as he strode inside. It was ridiculous, but I had the strong urge to beg him to hold me. I dried off and went to my bedroom to wait for my turn to shower. I fell face down on the bed, feeling lethargic and fuzzy-headed. I thought I could have slept for days after that out-of-this-world orgasm. I heard the bathroom door open and only realized as Tristan sucked in a gasp that I was buck naked on top of the covers, towel on the floor. "Sorry," I mumbled. He didn't respond, but I felt the bed move as he sat at my hip. My skin felt like it was on fire as I sensed him just staring at my naked back for a long time. When he did speak, his voice was low and hoarse and sent a shiver of pure pleasure from my head to my toes. "I didn't get to rub your back. Time to finish your massage." I nearly purred my assent. His warm hand caressing the back of my thigh had me almost jumping out of my skin. He eased my legs open gently, and I could hear his breath coming out in hard little pants as he studied me. He pushed a big finger inside of me, and I was still wet enough that it went in smoothly. "I'm never this wet," I explained breathlessly, strangely embarrassed by it. He groaned, pushing in a second finger. He started up a rhythm that had me close to the edge again, shockingly fast. "I can't come twice," I warned him with a whimper. "I never do. I'm not a—" I moaned, pushing my knees to move against his wicked fingers. He pressed himself against my side, throwing one leg over mine to keep my legs spread wide. I knew he'd jerked himself off in the shower, but he was hard as a rock where his cock dug into my hip through his boxers. He bit down, with just the perfect amount of pressure on the tendon between my neck and shoulder, and I came with a long moan of purest pleasure. "You're not a what, Boo?" he asked, a rough whisper in my ear that made me tremble. My mind was blank. I couldn't even remember where I was, let alone what he meant by that question. "You said you can't come twice. You never do. And you started to say you weren't—" My mind grasped the conversation, if only barely. His big fingers were still inside of me, and it was hard to focus on anything else. "I'm not a multiple orgasm kind of girl." I finished the sentence for him. He chuckled into my neck, his fingers moving, pulling out, then pushing in again roughly. I didn't like rough, but I'd never had a rough caress feel so good before, and my hips circled, moving with his hands as he started up a hard rhythm. I made a loud sound of protest when he pulled his fingers out, but he just flipped me onto my back, quickly pushing them in again. His eyes on my body were mesmerizing. The look on his face was stark, his gaze hungry. "You know I just take that as a challenge, right?" he asked, moving down my body, his intent clear. "Where did you learn to do that?" I asked him. "Do what?" His face hovering over my groin. "That thing with your tongue." "I'm not answering that," he said firmly. That was fine, because I quickly forgot the question. "You know, I can do that with more than my tongue," he said, and punctuated the words with his hand, the thrusts of his fingers turning into a rough vibration that blew my mind to pieces. "You're so beautiful," he told me after I came down from my third glorious orgasm of the day. "That was 3, I told him, stunned. He moved up my body, smiling as though he was the one that had just gotten off 3 times. He kissed me, pushing his body onto mine, his bare chest pressing into mine, his stiff length nestling in just the perfect spot, rubbing it hard against me. If he hadn't been wearing boxers, we'd have been as good as having sex. I could taste myself on him, but I didn't care. I couldn't get enough of his mouth, or his weight on top of me. Usually I hated that feeling, of a man's weight pinning me down, but I relished it when it was Tristan. "I could do something for you," I offered, as he broke away from my mouth and started kissing my neck, his thick hardness thrusting against me in a frustrated rhythm. "No, this is for you. I still owe you a back massage." I pulled his face back to mine, sucking at his mouth, my legs moving to wrap around his hips in a death grip.
We both groaned, as that pushed him partially into me, even through his shorts. You were so tight on my fingers. You felt so perfect. I pushed against him, watching his face. I want you inside of me. He didn't even consider it, just shaking his head. That wasn't the deal. The deal was, I get you off, not I get you off and then take advantage of you while you're good and sated. You're not taking advantage.